Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The rising Ukrainian prospect Viktor Vykhryst, who's also known as Viktor Faust, and yes, that is confusing, and I'll come to that later, has advanced to 5-0 following a decision win over the veteran journeyman Kamil Sokolowski. So this fight was in France. It featured on the Tony Yoka and Christian Hammer undercard. So this fight, a 6-rounder, and overall I thought Viktor Vykhryst did a pretty solid job in this fight. Kamil Sokolowski is always in shape, he's game, you know what he can do. He can land some left hooks. He is a game opponent. There was some good body work from Sokolowski, but ultimately the height, the reach, just the overall skill from Viktor Vykhryst and some of the combination punching, it ultimately proved to be too much, and it was a comfortable decision win here. He even had Sokolowski down in the 3rd round, and it was an interesting fight in the sense that it sort of took a couple of rounds to warm up. I think the 3rd round was where Viktor Vykhryst peaked, and then after that it sort of seemed to just sort of taper off just a little bit, and he comfortably fought the rest of the rounds, taking the decision. So there was a lot to like about the performance. There was good 1-2s. The right hand was certainly a weapon. I think his left hook is an underrated punch, and he was in control pretty much from start to finish. And Sokolowski in spots had success, but overall Viktor Vykhryst was in control and never really looked like he was going to lose this fight. And I did think in that 3rd round, if he had continued that sort of pressure into the 4th, and it was the volume that sort of seemed to give Sokolowski some issues. He started to throw a lot of punches in combination in that 3rd round. The series that dropped Sokolowski, which culminated in a left hook, I mean, there was just punches to the body and head with both hands, about half a dozen to 8 punches in that sequence that saw him ultimately hit the deck. And I don't think Kamil Sokolowski was so hurt to the point that he was, almost on the way out. But you certainly got the sense that if Vykhryst was able to keep pouring on the pressure, he might be able to end the fight. And recently Sokolowski had fought Zan Kossobutski, and that was the same sort of situation in that fight. It seemed to be that Kossobutski, like Vykhryst in this one, was getting the rounds in and, making sure he got some action in. And then when he sort of poured on the pressure, Kossobutski was able to get Sokolowski out of there. And that's the way it looked like it was heading for a time in this fight. But then ultimately, it sort of tapered off just a little bit. And for the rest of the fight, Viktor Vykhryst was in control, no issues. So overall, impressive looking performance. This was a good litmus test at this point. Heading into this, he'd had 4 fights on the ledger. Kamil Sokolowski is a very appropriate test at this point. Even though his record doesn't suggest that maybe he would be, because obviously he's lost far more than he's won, he is a very solid test for a guy with 5 fights on the record. So yeah, I'm interested to see more, and you may remember I did feature him earlier this year in my Emerging Prospects video. He's had a few post-COVID fights already, but ahead of the Sokolowski one, and I think he's making every post a winner. He's promoted by EC Boxing. That's part of the reason that he was on this Yoka card, because he's in the same stable as Christian Hammer, managed to get him onto this, and it was another good showcase fight. But there was a bit more on the line here. It was a step up of sorts, and he passed the test. I thought overall he managed the range well. Underrated left hook. The jab, it was good when he decided to use it. He sort of, put it away a little bit later in the fight, but when he was managing the range well, working from the outside, the jab was a very effective weapon, and he was following it up with the right hand, snapping Sokolowski's head back a number of times, like this shot here on screen. Good counter right hand we saw in the fight as well, but I did think at times that he was a little bit guilty of headhunting. The body was open there to be hit, and the occasional time that he did go to the body, especially later in the fight, he was having some success. But hard to sort of nitpick too much, because he is developing. He's still, a prospect with just 5 fights, and we're going to see more of him. Hopefully we get some more incremental step-ups, but I like what I saw. And just before I go, circling back to something I mentioned at the start of the video, So there is two names here. So we have Viktor Vykhryst, which is his real name, and then you have Viktor Faust, which he is seemingly going by for some of his fights at least. Not all of them, because the Ukrainian one, the card he was on the Usyk 17 event a couple of months ago, was going by Viktor Vykhryst. But for this fight, which was in France, Viktor Faust. As far as I'm aware, the Faust part is a nickname, and potentially because he is living and training in Germany that they have changed it or are intending for that to be his name that he's known by going forward. But it's a little confusing to say the least. And on BoxRec, his record is obviously by his real name, Viktor Vykhryst. And the Faust part, where that comes from, isn't entirely clear, but if you do Google it, there is a German legend where, a magician / alchemist, he sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and power. I don't know if the last name, if that's part of it, but it is a little quizzical, and I really haven't seen any explanation to sort of for the two name thing, or if they're going over one of the other going forward, because certainly that makes it easier, for fans. But if you have any knowledge of this, if you're Ukrainian or German, you've seen something about it, please let me know. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.